Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very
Sulaiman.
much.
Thank you so much. So we are going to conclude the opening ceremony. Immediately we will start our first session. Before we start our first session, I will just hand it over to our sessions here, Dr. Sulaiman. Just before I hand it over, just I want to introduce Dr. Sulaiman. Dr. Sulaiman, she is basically from Myanmar, but she has completed her master's PhD from International Islamic University, Malaysia, Faculty of Law. Now she is just currently she's working as a deputy dean, Faculty of Law, Multimedia University. Yeah, she's a very good friend of mine. So we work together, we studied together. Okay, we have a lot of memories. So we invited her here. So Dr. Soimon, it's your time. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor, for kind introductions. And in fact, I'm very honored to be here today as a chairperson, and it's a blessing that to meet all of you virtually, despite having this global pandemic. And I hope this network we can continue collaborations and further activities in the future. So without further delay, I would like to explain just a little bit of you know rules for this section, the first sections. We have according to the list that given to me, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 presenters in the list for the first sections that I'll be sharing. So for each presenter, I think you are given 10 minutes, but maybe you can go for like 15 minutes, but not more than 15 minutes, because I understand sometimes it's very, difficult to explain everything within 10 minutes. So I think we can allow you to speak for at least 15 minutes, but not more than 15 minutes. So, and then we will just continue with all the presentations. And after all the 6 presenters finish their presentations, then we will open for question and answer sections. So without further delay, let me invite the very first speaker of this section, Ms. Naja Inani Abdul Jalil from University Utara, Malaysia, and she'll be speaking on developing sustainable residential tenancy scheme for Malaysia. Ms. Naja, the floor is yours.
Wait, hi, assalamualaikum, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm trying to present my paper now. Wait, okay, so this is my, can you all hear me? Can you see the paper that I'm presenting right now?
Yes, can see you. Yes.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. So this is the topic for the paper that I'm intending to publish. So the topic is developing sustainable residential tenancy scheme for Malaysia. Okay, so I'm co-writing this with Professor Dr. Ainul Jaria Maidin from UIA. So for the introduction, for this topic, we are focusing on the needs to introduce the rental system, a comprehensive rental system for the residential tenancy in Malaysia. So as for the introduction, housing or shelter is considered one of the important needs in the human life after food, and it is one of the most regulated sector. So it is a basic necessity, and it will have a direct influence and consequential effect on human life, such as on health, the economy, the education, the employment, and also the social life. So the agenda of 2030, agenda for sustainable development, have been adopted in Malaysia on 25th September 2015, whereby in this matter, upon adoption, then Malaysia give commitments toward the sustainable, resilient and inclusive development. So in this matter, SGD Goal 11 is relevant for our discussion, as the goal is to make city inclusive, safe, resilient and also sustainable. So within this concept, to achieve this goal, what Malaysia should do is that in order to safeguard, in order to uphold this agenda, Malaysia has to safeguard the security of tenure, to houses and also to land, and this can be achieved by having a very comprehensive, a very what we call comprehensive legal system, whereby which will introduce legally binding documents such as sale and purchase agreement, finance agreement, rental agreement, which will be registered or endorsed in the document title to land. Okay, so renting and home ownership. So the right to adequate housing does not require the government to house the whole population. Okay, so it is not what we call it is not for the government to perpetuate the idea that home ownership is for everybody. So for Malaysia, the introduction for the Residential Act was formally suggested in the Malaysian budget in 2018. Okay, up until now, however, the discussion has been done with the concerned ministry, and then is yet to be finalized on the introduction of the Residential Tenancy Act. However, in Malaysia, although the rate of home ownership is high, i.e. 72.5% as compared to Malaysia, this data is also consists of informal housing such as housing built in the riverbank and also containing data from the illegal settlement. So the rate of home ownership cannot be regarded as indicator for home ownership, and it does not reflect what we call the real situation in Malaysia. So why we need renting, why we need to introduce the residential tenancy scheme for Malaysia. So renting should be marketed as a mode of housing, and it should not be regarded in comparison or in competition or inferior to home ownership. Okay, because this is important, because the affected people are those who are young, who are mobile, low income earners, especially those who do not have the informal or not fixed income. So to make things worse, these people, this group of people are not qualified to have a housing loan from conventional financial institutions. So if they are not given housing loan, they could not what we call enter into the home ownership, okay, to purchase the home itself. So since the topic for our discussion today is on the sustainability, the theme for our conference, so I would like to also tie in with the concept of sustainability, whereby it can be defined as the ability of human to make development which meet the needs of the current generation without compromising the need of future generation to meet their needs. So we have to balance between the current generation and our future generation. Okay, so the focus now should be on the built environment, should be on the sustainability in economic and also the social life. So when we're talking about sustaining the ability to house, so the consideration should be in place to short and long-term costs such as running a house, housing pricing, and also cost efficiency in terms of water, good energy, and also other services. So in achieving the sustainability, it also contains the procedural element which need to be forged into statute. So when we're talking about sustainability, how to achieve that, we must we must regulate it into the statute, into the regulation and cases in order to reflect the government is to reflect the aspiration of the government and also the aspiration of the community. Okay. So okay, so we must also realize when we're talking about sustainability in housing, the home ownership is not for everybody. Okay, so the government should not perpetuate the idea, the agenda that housing the nation will require the government to house everyone under the home ownership campaign. Okay, so the methodology that used in this paper, this is based on the qualitative research methodology, where the current law, the practice, and the regulation on residential tenancy in Malaysia is assessed, and that it is compared with the practice of Scotland. So for the legal framework in Malaysia, we have the NLC, National Land Code, the Contract Act, the Distress Act, Civil Law Act, Rule of Court, and also Specific Relief Act. Okay, so for this method, it will separately cover for different subject or subject matter. For example, for the NLC, it will cover for the existence of the tenancy, i.e. for the period of 3 years and below. For the Contract Act, it will cover for the execution of the tenancy agreement. For the Distress and Civil Law Act, it will cover for the apa tu, recovery of the rental premises together with the rents if the tenant refuse to pay, or holding over after the period of the tenancy. Rule of court and also Specific Relief Act now has been in place to prevent the action of self-help by the landlord. So if, for example, the tenant refuse to get out from refuse to leave the house, or is causing damage to the house, then the court, the landlord must go to the civil court in order to enforce his right. He can no longer apply self-help, and in doing so, in approaching the civil court, then we are talking about the lengthy process and also the expensive, what we call costly civil procedure in order to uphold the right of the landlord. Okay, so the focus of our discussion, i.e. The comparison on which I would like to draw attention to, is on the standardized tenancy agreement, dispute resolution, and also security deposit. So the ultimatum for this comparison is to provide apa tu, the concept of easy justice to people, whereby if the current situation now, the parties has to go for the civil court in order to enforce their right. So hopefully by enacting the law, which is quite which we can see by comparison to the Scotland, then the process of obtaining justice will be relatively easy. So for the Scotland, I'm sorry, we are having heavy rain now in Penang actually. Okay, so for Scotland, we have Private Housing Tenancy Scotland Act 2016, okay, which is common in December 2016, why it introduced the law governing the private residential tenancy. It intends to provide security, predictability, security for both of the landlord and also tenant. So for the dispute resolution, for the standardized tenancy agreement, so it is provided for under the Act, whereby the landlord must use a model private residential tenancy agreement, and then the landlord also must give to the tenant private residential tenancy model agreement, easy note for tenant. So in doing so, it will help the tenant to understand what are the rules and the regulation, what are the rights and obligations of the parties in the tenancy agreement. So if the landlord were to draft the agreement itself, then the landlord must also give private residential tenancy statutory term supporting note. Okay, so the aspiration behind this is to help both parties to understand their right and obligation. Okay, and then we have for dispute resolution, we have the first tier tribunal by Housing and Property Chamber. So in this matter, the guided principle is that to be accessible, fair, and the proceeding to be handled quickly and effectively. So the matters heard on rent, eviction, repairs, landlord entry to the rental premises, and other civil proceeding. So what are important feature in this tribunal is that the disputant can bring friends and supporters, including legal representatives, to get the emotional and practical assistance. Okay, so They also have a case management discussion where it can be done virtually through video conference or conference call. And the purpose is to explore the possibility of settling the dispute early without going for full proceeding. Okay, and then for security deposit, the amount is 2 months, and then this deposit is put under the safeguard of the third party, independent party, i.e., it is put under the tenancy deposit scheme, which is run by the independent companies. Okay, so the practice now in Malaysia is that the deposit will be kept by the landlord. Okay, so the problem is that when the expiry of the tenancy agreement, then the landlord refused to give back the security deposit for whatever reason. So in this matter, for Scotland, what they did, they will give the security deposit to this independent company, and for the whole duration of the tenancy, deposit will be kept by this TDS, okay, tenancy deposit scheme. So the risk is that there will be less risk that the security deposit will be misappropriated by the landlord, and even if the landlord goes for bankruptcy, goes declared as a bankrupt or out of the business, then the security deposit is still properly managed by the TDS. Okay, and then okay, so I'm coming at the for the last two slides of my discussion. So for the analysis and also the finding. Okay, so the current law poses the incoherent practice as to the exercise of right between the landlord and also the tenant. So the pursuit of justice and fair is largely determined based on the financial capabilities of the parties, as the lengthy and also costly legal procedure will demotivate the parties to sue for their rights. Okay, so this is the what we call what we are trying to achieve by having the concept of easy justice between the parties. So the specific residential tenancy legislation is important toward maintaining the relationship between the landlord and also the tenant. So as for the conclusion, we must remember that the concept of right to adequate housing should also be expanded to include residential tenancy sector for the whole nation. Okay, so the regulatory sector should be aligned to create a system that help to promote a viable, sustainable residential tenancy, which is habitable and also safe. The law should be fair to both the landlord and also the tenant. Okay, so that will be all for my presentation today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Naja, and it was a great presentation and on land law, particularly on tenancy agreement. And maybe I think some of the audience have some questions for you. So please reserve your questions for now. So we will discuss further in the Q&A sections later on. So now I would like to invite second presenter, Nabil Iqbal from North-South University. And he'll be discussing on COVID-19 pandemic perspective of the Holy Quran. Brother Nabil.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my paper with you. So I'll just quickly share the slides first of all. Right, so you should be able to see the slides. So first of all, greetings and salam to everyone, to the respected organizers, to the keynote speakers, to the guests, and the fellow presenters. My name is Nabil Iqbal. I work at the North-South University. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Economics. And during the lockdown, which started at the end of April in Bangladesh, I started to write this paper. I wanted to explore the perspective of the Holy Quran, because I am actually a very dedicated, ardent student of the Quran. I study it almost every day, only for 30 minutes. But I'm very passionate about its message, and I wanted to share the wisdom with everyone, with my fellow human beings, and that was the main motivation behind the paper. So actually, the existing literature, if we look at literature on theology, social science, it informs us that religion can actually provide a coping mechanism. It can help us with trauma, with adversities. So I just wanted to explore what is the rationale of the Quran? How does it help us to deal with adversities such as pandemic, such as the COVID-19 pandemic? So we are mainly going to explore the rationale, the explanation behind these adversities like pandemics. Why do they happen? So what is the spiritual explanation? Right. Anyways, and to understand the argument and the message of the Quran, we actually also look at the existing literature, especially from the social science. This is what I actually found in my studies. If you use the existing literature from the social science, you actually get a more holistic and broader understanding of the argument and the rationale of the Quran. So we'll see that as we move on. So, what is the to understand the first and main rationale of the Quran? First of all, we need to understand this sociological concept of collective consciousness. It's a fundamental concept in sociology, right? It's quite common. Everyone most likely knows about this. It refers to the shared beliefs and attitude within a community or within humanity as a whole. Let's say, for example, now human beings are becoming more and more materialistic. So that is our shared belief, right? We value material goods and comfort more than spirituality or etc, right, or religion. So that is like our shared belief right now. That is the state of our collective consciousness right now, that we value materialism more than religion, let's say. And I'm just saying, anyways, so the Quran argues that the root cause of these global problems is the degeneration of the collective consciousness of humanity. Right. So since we are becoming more and more greedy, excessively materialistic, right? So to corrupted actions. For example, we overproduce, we overconsume, we pollute, right? We destroy the ecosystem. You can see this very clearly. Ultimately, these actions are connected to our shared beliefs and attitudes, right? Excessive materialism leads to this problem. And interestingly, a few scientists agree with this idea. In the DW News, ecologist argues that the disruption of ecosystem, which is actually connected to our excessive materialism, right? Our one for more and more goods leads to more production, the destruction of ecosystem, and it's connected to pandemics. That is what interestingly, one of the ecologists argue in this particular news article. I actually had to remove some articles because I thought there was a limit in the reference list. But there are other scientists who agree on this matter, that it's actually connected to our actions, pandemics and let's say global warming and all these problems. It's connected to human actions, right? I think all of us can understand and realize that. So that is what the Quran is emphasizing. In chapter number 30, verse number 41, it clearly explicitly highlights this. The problem is the collective human actions which leads to these problems, and ultimately the actions are connected to our consciousness, to our thoughts and our beliefs, right? So it's like a more holistic idea, right? That was one of the major motivations behind writing the paper. Professor Cruz was highlighting the importance of interdisciplinary work. He was talking about the importance of a holistic understanding, right? And that was one of the motivations behind this paper as well, right? So we get a very holistic understanding that our consciousness, our thoughts, beliefs are getting corrupted. This leads to corrupted actions. This leads to problems, right? Like global warming and pandemics. Anyways, to understand the nature of the degeneration, right? What kind of degeneration are we talking about, right? What is the problem? How is our collective consciousness deteriorating? To understand this, we look at a very famous essay by Sir John Glubb. I think it's called the Fate of Empires. It's a very famous essay. And interestingly, we found a lot of similarity with the argument of the Quran. For example, Sir John Glubb identifies that, before the fall of civilizations, because looking back at history, civilizations have been coming and going. But just before their fall, there's a buildup of intellectual pride. The community or civilization becomes too proud, and they start hating others, and they become more lackluster. There's a lack of dedication in their work, in their public life, and they become, corrupted politically. That is what he highlights. And most people are driven by narrow self-interest. So they're not really concerned about fellow human beings. They're not concerned about others, the poor, the needy. They don't care about that, right? So and there is an indifference to religion, right, which we can actually see prevailing in the current world. So quite interesting, what kind of Sir John identified. We can see that maybe, in many places globally. And, all of this is, I think, connected, right? Laxity of sexual morals and increase in the influence of women in public life. John Glubb identifies this, we can argue with this, right? But this is what he identifies. So I'm just sharing his, point of view. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm not, saying it's right. But this is what he found out, interestingly. So all of these actually happen before the fall of civilizations or major problems, right? So civilization falls because of a collective adversity, right? A major adversity. So, so it's kind of consistent with the argument of the Quran, right? So this is the degeneration of the collective consciousness, and ultimately that leads to adversities that might lead to fall of civilizations. Anyways, so moving on, right? Now, what is the rationale, right? So why would, let's say, an all-knowing creator, right? Why would he, put humanity through such, calamities or pandemics? Well, the Quran argues that it can trigger a movement back towards God consciousness. So this is the idea, right? So now we are slowly drifting away from all spirituality. We are becoming overly materialistic. So, adversities of a global scale can, bring this consciousness back to God consciousness, right? We become, more spiritual. We, become, more caring, compassionate, because it's kind of related, connected, right? Anyways, interestingly, Benzen, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she does a lot of research on, religion and interdisciplinary research, religion, social science. And she found out that during the peak of the first wave in March, the Google search for prayer reached the highest level ever recorded. And, coincidentally, this is perfectly consistent with the argument of the Quran, because this is what Quran is telling us, right? The people will come back towards God because of these adversities, and this is what Benzen found out in an independent study, right? I don't know her. I just came across this while doing the literature review, and she found this out, right? The people searched for prayer, the most during March, during the peak of the first wave. So again, we can see that, by looking at the existing literature from social science or other disciplines, we can actually obtain a better understanding of the arguments of the Quran. Maybe we can find some support or not, So anyways, so let's just briefly talk about the correction mechanism, right? Because the Quran is arguing that adversities can lead to the correction of our collective consciousness. So for example, Quran is arguing that adversities can cause individuals and societies to become humble, right? So please remember, just a few slides ago, Sir John Glubb was saying these are the problems that can lead to the downfall of a civilization, right? Excessive pride, arrogance, intellectual pride. So, adversities can actually kind of help us cultivate humility, right? So from arrogance, we can move towards humility. So again, that's like a correction, right, of the collective consciousness. Anyways, interestingly, to understand humility, we looked at research in positive psychology. And there's quite a few research, but we mainly focused on one paper. And we found that, humility, it's related to a lot of other positive traits. And humility is sometimes misunderstood. We might think humility is not speaking up, it's like, laying low. That is not actually the case. Humility means, having the proper understanding of your place in the universe or in the world, right? We're just another human being, right? And we're not special, right? Our nationality or our country is not like, special, better than others, that does not, so, humility can lead to these corrections, right? Anyways, interestingly, the paper identified that humility is connected to many positive traits, such as, lower rates of infidelity, less exploitative behavior. So there is more cooperation among, people, among groups, if they're more humble, right? Because I think it's a very trending topic, right? Intellectual humility. So I think definitely that helps in corporation, that helps in societies. If people are intellectually humble, that can lead to more cooperation, fairness, generosity. Anyways, that is what Wright et al. Found out. It's a very interesting paper, gives you a very deep perspective of humility, which in fact the Quran does not. The Quran just says it can cause people to become humble, but what is the nature of that humility? To get a broader understanding, we can read this paper, and I found it very fascinating. Anyways, moving on. So the idea is that the correction can also take place at individual levels, right? Walsh found found support for this argument. People can become more resilient, more resourceful during difficult times, right? Tests, trial and tribulations, difficult times can cause individuals to, become more developed, more resilient. So that is what also the Quran argues as well. Especially the famous, Mufassir Nauman Ali Khan, he argues this, right? So this is one of the rationale. At the individual level, we can also it can also lead to self-development. Adversities can lead to self-development. So there is, one last rationale. I'm not sure how much time I have. I'll try to quickly wrap up. So there is, another very interesting rationale of the Quran. The Quran is arguing that during adversities, during times of collective stress, uh, we can actually find out who are the true, sincere people, right? It's like a filtration process, right? It helps us identify who are the, best people of the community. And interestingly, Levine in his paper found something very similar, right? So it's a paper in sociology. He found that, during adversities, collective stress that affects the entire community, two groups of people emerge. Activists, so they are, actively trying to better the situation, and they're trying to help others, right? So definitely we saw this during the COVID pandemic as well, right? In Bangladesh, we saw this, many students, many groups, they actually went down on the streets. They were helping the lower income groups. But then again, there were many people who just, were free riders, or they didn't do anything. They didn't care. So the Quran argues, this helps us to identify, the best or most sincere people of the community. And this idea is consistent with a very important concept of Quran called sabr. It's an Arabic word. So sabr implies, not losing hope. So for example, during the pandemic, many people might have lost hope, right? But sabr implies you don't lose hope, and you keep on doing good deeds during difficult times. So during this pandemic, those people who actively engaged in good works, it does not necessarily have to be, helping the poor, because that has a risk element to it, right? So infection risk is there. So you can just, simply look after your family, right? If someone is actually looking after his or her family, taking care of them, showing them love and kindness, then that indicates that that person it has sabr, and he's like, one of the activists, or that is like the true and sincere individual of the society. Because many people might just, become like a couch potato, right? All day they're not doing anything, or they're not taking care of their family. So that is like the opposite of sabr, right? uh, Anyway, so the Quran, so the adversity helps us identify these, different groups, distinct groups. So anyways, so what are the implications? I'll quickly wrap up. So how many minutes do I have? Can you please tell me? 2 minutes, I think. Right. Anyways.
Yes, it's like 1 minute. You can take 1 minute for a wrap up.
All right. So I'll just finish it within 1 minute. So what are the implications? So actually, we should see adversities as an opportunity for self-development, right? And we should actually make use of these true and sincere individuals that emerge during difficult times, right? So the good people that come out, the sincere people, we can give them, leadership roles. We can give them community roles, because we become sure, these are actually true, sincere people. They're not in it for, any worldly benefit or personal benefit, right? Because anyways, so one last important point is, a very important implication is societies and individuals should guard against their, degeneration of morals or correct collective consciousness. So we should actually actively try to promote, virtue, goodness, cooperation. So all the opposite of what, Sir John Glubb identified. So we should try to cultivate all the opposite characteristics in our society. Right. If my time is over, I'll stop here. But if you allow me 1 minute, I'll just wrap it up.
Yes, sure. Yes, please proceed.
Interesting. It's a very interesting idea, insight that I found at the end of the paper while writing at the end. So the idea, right, the consciousness becomes corrupt and adversity brings it back to previous good state. So these kind of correction mechanisms are also in other systems like biology, right? For example, the temperature increases, the body can bring it back. In physics, when the electrons become excited, it loses energy and comes back. In economics, we see markets become overexcited and it can, overproduction, it can come back to the equilibrium. So interestingly, these kind of correction mechanisms exist in diverse systems and disciplines. So one of the argument of the Quran is if we study this universe, we will actually realize that there is a creator and a designer, right? Very simple, that's it. If we study this universe, we are going to realize there has to be a designer, and probably this is one of a sign for that, right? The same correction mechanisms exist in different systems, so that might indicate that there is only one designer, right, who has put the same mechanism in all these systems. So that is just one argument of the Quran. Again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. That is not the objective. So this is just a summary. You can have a look at it. It just summarizes the entire paper. So I'll end my presentation here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I took extra time. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Nabil. Actually, it was great discussions and very relevant discussions in times of pandemic. And personally, I agree with all the points, all the profound points that you made just now during your presentation. You highlighted especially for all the human beings, sincerity, humility, simplicity, and hopefulness in times of calamity, and keep doing good things. So I also would like to request you if you can share all the literature that you referred to during your presentation, and that will be very helpful for all of us. Thank you. So without further delay, allow me to invite the third presenter, Mr. Muhammad Emmanuel Hussein, who will be discussing on human rights situation in Bangladesh 2019. Mr. Imamul, you're from Human Rights Support Society. Are you here?
Thank you for giving me floor. At first, I would like to share my screen.
I think, Mr. Nabil, could you please stop sharing your screen so that Mr. Imamul can share?
Sure. Yes, extremely sorry.
Thank you.
Can you see my slide? Hello.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. At first, I would like to thank.
I think you haven't opened your PowerPoint. You have PowerPoint or PDF document?
Yes.
We can see only your folder.
Yes, can you see?
Cannot, maybe because you have to choose the correct, are you sharing window or screen?
Window. I'm sharing Windows.
Actually, you have to close, then you have to open your slide, then you have to share.
Yeah. Could you please try again?
Yeah, just close everything. Yeah, now you open your folder there, then share. You open your slide, then share. open your slide first, then just click on present now, then Windows, then you will see your slide there, then you have to just click on your slide, then it will be appear here.
Present now.
Then Windows,
Yes.
then can you see your slide there?
Yes.
Yeah, just click on your slide, then share. Click on
Oh,
share.
thank you. Now.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for giving the support. At first, I'd like to thank the Authority of Asia and African Research Center for accepting my paper and giving me the opportunity to share here. Uh, I am Imamul Hussain from Bangladesh. Now, currently, I am working as a research and publication officer of a leading human rights organization named Human Rights Support Society. Today, I am going to present a paper titled Human Rights Situation in Bangladesh 2019. Actually, human rights violation is become a norm in Bangladesh, notwithstanding the country's constitutional obligation and recognition of many international treaties and conventions to protect its citizens. That's why I have tried to depict the real situation of human rights and covered a range of issues. I think these are the fundamental and vital human rights violation issues which are frequently occur in our country in every aspect of our daily life. The grand objective of the paper is improvement of human rights situation by enhancing engagement of youth in protecting and promoting human rights situation through investigation, documentation, and follow-up remedial action. The other objective is, first, to raise awareness among mass people, especially youth, about human rights violations. Second, to provide concrete and evidential data of ongoing human rights violation to the concerned authority both home and abroad. And considering the nature of the report, a mixed methodologies and both primary and secondary data have been applied while conducting this report. Now I will discuss some of the worst form of human rights violation in Bangladesh. First of all, extrajudicial killing. The term extrajudicial killing means execution without following any jurisdiction. So, an extrajudicial killing is a killing of a person by governmental authorities without following any judicial proceeding or legal action. So, if a citizen's life, liberty, and security have been granted by the Article 32 of Bangladesh Constitution and the Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 32 of Bangladesh Constitution demonstrates no person shall be deprived of life and his liberty. In the context of extrajudicial killing, we see the government authorities have been used different terminologies to avoid their responsibility of extrajudicial killing, such as death during crossfire, encounter, gunfight, and infight, etc. According to the data of Human Rights Support Society, a total of 396 persons were reportedly extrajudicially killed in 2019. The draft show almost every law enforcement agencies of Bangladesh are involved in doing extrajudicial killing. So it is a matter of grave concern for us, and the Bangladesh Police and Rapid Action Battalion have played the leading role in case of extrajudicial killing. Move on to another topics. Enforced disappearance. In Bangladesh, enforced disappearance is frequently used as a strategy to spread the feeling of insecurity and fear not only to the relative of the victims, but also to a community as a whole. Because the widespread culture of impunity of law enforcement agencies have permitted this brutal practice to be continued to protect and ensure the ensure the power of existing government. And we see most of the victims of enforced disappearance are members of the political groups, human rights defenders, journalists, and those who oppose the government activities. According to the report of HRSS, in 2019, a total of 23 people have been disappeared. Out of them, 10 were returned to home, and one was presented before the court, and we could not address what happened to the other rest 12 persons. These pictures show in the International Day of Enforced Disappearance, family member of the victim of enforced disappearance holding a photograph of their beloved one and demanding safe return of the victim. Move on to another issues. Violence against women. Violence against women is a main social problem in contemporary Bangladesh, and the nature of violence commonly committed are physical and psychological torture, sexual harassment, rape, especially child rape and gang rape, dowry-related violence, trafficking, acid throwing, and family feud-related violence. And most of the cases of violence against women, we see husband, in-laws, and other family members are the main perpetrator. And the reason of domestic violence against women are often trivial, such as questioning of the husband, failure to perform household work and care of children, economic problems, dowry-related dispute, etc. This draft shows the vulnerable condition of women in our country. According to this draft, a total of 1,429 female and girls have been victims of rape in 2019. So it depicts that the condition of women are deteriorating day by day in our country. Let's move on to another issues. Border killing. Border dispute is considered one of the prime issues of conflict among Bangladesh, Myanmar, and India. Because of the killing, torturing, arresting, and beating of Bangladeshi nationals on a trivial ground. In case of border killing, we see India has always been violating Memorandum of Understanding, treaties signed between India and Bangladesh, and international laws. According to human rights activists and right groups, the culture of impunity, lack of accountability, and soft approach from Bangladesh side are the main reason for continuation of border killing. According to this draft, we see a total of 42 people, Bangladeshi nationals, have been killed, other 4 injured, and 51 were arrested by the Indian Border Security Force BSF. At the same time, 2 people were killed, 7 arrested, and another 17 were injured by the Myanmar Border Guard Police. So, this figure tells us the vulnerable condition of Bangladeshi citizens throughout the border area. Move on to other issues. Attack on minorities. Like many other countries, ethnic and religious minorities are the most persecuted and oppressed people in Bangladesh. Because the seeds of violence against the minority communities are inherent within the structure of the modern system, which turn the human being into vote bank and vote constituency. And it's continue because of the lack of accountability and transparency of the state mechanism and make the situation worse. According to this draft, in 2019, 11 minority people were injured. At the same time, 38 temples and 3 houses were partially or fully destroyed, and we also see 4 land grabbing incident in 2019. So it can be said the minority people are also deprived uh, from their liberty and life in Bangladesh. Last but not the least, attack on journalists. The existing government has enacted Digital Security Act and Draft Broadcast Law 2018 to stop the voice of journalists, other opposite political leaders, human rights defenders, and those who oppose the government policy. And it is assumed that freedom of expression is a precondition for a functional democracy and a participatory decision-making process. But the government of Bangladesh imposed restriction on freedom of expression to stop the voice of dissidents. On the other hand, we see threat, physical attacks, and other forms of harassment are very common for journalists in Bangladesh. So, as it is said, journalists are the fifth pillar of a country, but in our country, the journalists, print media activists are not able to continue their professional activities without fear. This chart also depicts the real condition of journalists in our country. In 2019, 17 journalists were arrested, another 33 were threatened by the law enforcement agencies and ruling political party, and 51 were injured during performing their professional job, and the other one killed in a total of 91 incidents. At the same time, we saw a total of 45 persons have been arrested under the Digital Security Act in a total of 49 incidents in 2019. And it is the most talkative issues in our country because nowadays government of Bangladesh are trying to restrict it, trying to control over the dissident by imposing Digital Security Act. Concluding remark. After analyzing the overall human rights situation of Bangladesh, it can be said that the human rights situation in Bangladesh is as dismal as it was in the previous years, because the government authorities failed to show respect for the life, liberty, and security of its citizens. On the other hand, domestic violence, especially the incident of rape, child rape, and gang rape, and child abuse have been rising alarmingly in 2019. Similarly, a political vacuum has developed because of the government undertook repressive measures against the opposition. So, there have been a limited freedom of expression in order to continue the regime. That's why the rules of law have been compromised in our country. That's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Imamu, for a very comprehensive presentation within the limited time, and it was very interesting. And I have a few questions for you since it's in the area of international law. So I'll reserve my questions till the end of the session. So, okay. So without further delays, let me invite next presenter, Naja Shaira Chiramli from IIUM. She'll be discussing on inculcating sense of responsibility through restorative justice for child offender in Malaysia. Ms. Naja?
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone see my slides now?
Yes, yes, we can see the slide. Thank you.
Okay, good morning and assalamualaikum to everyone. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the organizer for hosting this event and for giving me a chance to present my paper. My name is Nur Najah Syairah binti Cik Ramli, and my paper today is entitled Inculcating Sense of Responsibility Through Restorative Justice for Child Offender in Malaysia. This research paper is actually written from my from my research, which is entitled Formulation of a Legal Framework of Restorative Justice in the Malaysian Child Justice System, and it is funded by my research grant. So as for this paper, I will be first presenting about the introduction of this paper regarding the basis of my research as well as the method of my research. Next, I will talk about the concept of restorative justice, just briefly in order to give understanding on how restorative justice work. Next, I will be talking about the impact of restorative justice to all stakeholders, I mean to all the affected people once a crime is committed by a child offender. Next one, I will be talking about the current approach in Malaysia, which is the approach taken by the Malaysian law on dealing with the child offender or child in conflict with the law, and I will conclude my paper. As for the introduction, I would like to refer to the two relevant international instruments which is very relevant to this paper. The first one is the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Administration of Juvenile Justice, or also known as the Beijing Rule. This Beijing Rule actually promotes the well-being of a child offender, which is we have to deal with them humanely and to reduce the need for legal intervention. The Rule 5.1 of the Beijing Rule states that the child justice system shall emphasize on the child well-being. So this Beijing Rule is actually important by highlighting that the well-being of the child should be a paramount. It is supported by Rule number 17 by saying that the deprivation of liberty shall be the last resort and to be applied restrictively. After the Beijing Rule, it is followed by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child, or also known as the CRC. The CRC promotes child reintegration and assuming their constructive role in the society. It encourages the restorative justice or diversion as an alternative to the child justice system. So based on these two international instruments, I believe that it will be a good basis for my research paper as for Malaysia to move forward to adapt with the international requirement as well as preserving our identity. So briefly, the concept of restorative justice has four important principles, which I derived from the research of Mr. Braithwaite. As we all know, Sir Braithwaite is one of the prominent researcher in the restorative justice. He said that these are the four important elements of the restorative justice. Firstly, under the restorative justice, we involve participation of all stakeholders. All stakeholders here means that all the people affected by the offense, for example, the child offender himself or the victim who is affected by the offense, as well as the parents who are responsible to the child. And we also will include representative of the society, which also need to restore their sense of security. Next one, restorative justice also involve disposal of the case based on group discussion and consensus. It is very different from the conservative court litigation, which only involve the judge and the prosecution officer. But here, under the restorative justice, all people are involved and all people are given the same chance to speak. Next one is that the restorative justice is to remedy the damage caused by the wrongful act. It is also very different to the conservative style of litigation, which is we tend to punish the child. But here, through restorative justice, the child is given a chance to remedy the damage he has caused directly to the victim, not to the state. And lastly, but the most important element of restorative justice is that the wrongful act is considered as an offense against the victim rather than the state. So that's why under the restorative justice, the remedy is to the victim, not to the state. It is very different to the normal court litigation whereby if the child has to pay compensation or if the child has to go through rehabilitation, the remedy is towards the state, while the victim has got nothing from the court litigation. So, through this paper, I have highlighted a lot of the impact of restorative justice, but the most importantly is that the restorative justice has a lot more positive impact towards the child offender. Firstly, the restorative justice divert the child offender from criminal court litigation, and eventually, in this way, the child offender will be diverted also away from being mixing up with the adult offender. The next one, the child will be able to explain and to have a say during the discussion or conference. It holds the child accountable for the damage caused, which is when the child is called during the family group conferencing or family mediation, the child will have a chance to say why he commits the crime and how he will be responsible for the offense. Next one is that to directly repair the damage caused to the victim. And lastly, to stimulate sense of responsibility. How this sense of responsibility will be stimulated? I beg your pardon, everyone. Can everyone hear my presentation or it is affected by the azan?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So how this restorative
But
justice?
the slides are not. The slides are not.
Yes, the slides are not changing, sister. Yes.
Where is it? I'm sorry.
I think it's still your very first slide that we can see.
How about now?
Oh, okay. Now we can see. Yes.
Sorry. So this I go back to my previous presentation first. So these are the international instruments that I've been referring to, and this this is the concept of restorative justice I've been explaining just now, and this is the impact of restorative justice to all stakeholders. Now I'm talking about the impact of restorative justice towards the child offender. So shall I continue? So just now we are talking about stimulating the sense of responsibility among the child offender. So how we would stimulate the sense of responsibility? It is by way of hearing their voice at the very first place. When the child offender is called for family group conferencing or family group mediation, they will have a say. They will have a chance to explain why they are committing the offense at the very first place. The next one is that they will be able to discuss together with the victim how they would repair the harm or the damage caused in consequence of the offense. Moving on, I'll be discussing on the impact of restorative justice to the victim. Through restorative justice, the victim may suggest a potential way to restore the injury. In what way the victim intended the offense, in what way the victim intended, how the child offender will be repairing the harm. The victim also will be able to explain the injury or the damage suffered from the commission of the offense. They will have also a time or a proper mechanism to reconcile a relationship with the child offender. As we all know, once an offense has been committed, there will be bad relationship between the victim and the child offender. But through restorative justice, we bring them together to discuss and to restore the relationship. Lastly, but the most importantly, is that the restorative justice restore the sense of I beg your pardon. The impact of restorative justice with the victim is that to restore the sense of security. They will feel secure if the child offender can directly repair the harm. They will feel secure if the child asks an apology for them. Lastly, I will talk about the impact of restorative justice towards the family, especially family of the child offender. The presence of the parents in the conference is that they will and they have a chance to object any resolution which seems depriving their child's right. For example, during the discussion, if the resolution is that to ask the child to work for the victim and not allowing them to go to school, it is depriving the child's right for education. It is depriving the child right for freedom. Next is that when the family is involved during the discussion or during the restorative justice conference, it will bring back the family relationship. Some of us, throughout the research, I have read that some of the factor why the child commit an offense is that when they have bad relationship with their parents or they have bad relationship with their family. So through restorative justice, we bring them together. We ask the parents to be responsible in securing the right of the child, so we could save the relationship between the child and the family. Lastly, parents will be responsible to secure basic rights of the child. Moving on to the current approach in Malaysia on how Malaysia now is dealing with the child offender. Currently, the resolution for the criminal case involving child is limited to the orders enumerated in Section 90 of the Child Act 2001. Among the orders that is allowed for the court to give to the child offender is that firstly is bond of good behavior, putting the child in proper custody by their parents or their proper guardian, payment of compensation, as well as imprisonment as the last resort. These orders enumerated under Section 90 of the Child Act is given based on court's discretion. The parents of the child or even the victim cannot choose what method to be taken for as to resolve the case. It's all solely based on decision of the court. The Malaysian practice is actually focusing on the court litigation and institutional rehabilitation rather than restorative justice. Although we can see that payment of compensation is one element of restorative justice, but again, it is highly depending on the court's discretion. And it is only a small element of restorative justice in the Malaysian child justice system. It's not we can see that in Malaysia currently we don't have a proper mechanism, or we don't have a proper framework for restorative justice to be applied for the child offender in Malaysia. So as a conclusion, having only small element of restorative justice in Section 90 of the Malaysian Child Act is not sufficient. Malaysia shall take initiative to make restorative justice as an independent method of disposing a criminal case involving child offender, following examples from New Zealand, United Kingdom, and Australia. Well, although I'm saying that we can follow the examples from New Zealand, United Kingdom, and Australia, but the Malaysian itself, at the micro level of the society, we do have the culture of restorative justice. Once a damage is done towards a family, for example, they will have a discussion among them as to restore the damage. Although it is not written properly academically, but natively or originally in Malaysia, we do practice restorative justice. So the restorative justice approach is the best way to inculcate sense of responsibility to all stakeholders, when all of them involved in the conference to resolve the case. Eventually, it is a sustainable method to reduce rate of reoffending when the child is directly responsible towards the victim. I think that's all my presentation. I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation again for my research grant entitled Legal Framework for Restorative Justice for Child Offender in Malaysia. And I also to express my gratitude toward my family, especially my mother, for the endless support during my writing of this paper as well as for this presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Naja. That was fantastic presentation, and the topic is very, very interesting. And I also have a questions for you later because the topic is very, very interesting, and your presentation was excellent. Thank you so much. And now I would like to invite next speaker, Mr. Muhammad Tuhinmia from IUM as well. And he'll be speaking on legal protection of street children in Bangladesh with references to international and national laws. Mr. Tuhin, floor is yours.
You hearing me? Just a minute. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. Okay, are you seeing my slides? Are you watching the slides?
Yes, can see the slide.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator Suwaimul, and thank you all the participants. Today I'm going to present our paper named Legal Protection of Street Children in Bangladesh with references to international and national laws. I'm Muhammad Tuhinmia, and one of my friend Monirul Islam also cooperated with this paper. So here is my content. I will discuss first of all the definition and types of street children, and then I will go through the challenges of street children in Bangladesh they are facing, and then we will analyze the children rights under international law and the national legislations. Okay, the term street children first appeared in the United States and Brazil. However, in Bangladesh, there are a lot of street children, If we talk about the number, the street children is around 1.5 million in Bangladesh. However, one of the researcher, Atkinson, he assumed that the number will be expanded more than 1.6 million by 2024. If we talk about the street children, who are actually the street children, then it is difficult to define just because of their circumstances, their living, their appearance, foundation characteristics. But we can say that as our national legislation, that who are under 18, they are the children, and who are live on the street, they are the street children. However, Patricia Ray, one of the researcher, he defined the street children as the children living on the street are those individuals who are publicly residing and have no family. And children also who work on the street and they and return to their families, they are also the street children, and children also living with their families in the street. So I'm going to discuss the challenges of street children in Bangladesh they are facing and the difficulties. First of all, their life and status of our society in Bangladesh. Street children in Bangladesh live in extreme poverty and they do not know their rights. Normally, they do not have education. That's why uh, they are not aware of their rights. They struggle for education, medical service, and they are isolated from the standard society as they are living in on a street. This puts children at greater risk of abuse, exploitation, including sexual abuse and torture. Street children are found at the transport station. I mean the bus station, railway station. You will find them on the slum. Even if we talk about in Dhaka city, you will find them everywhere on the street. And sometimes you will see them as a cloth picker, as a doorman, as a bus or truck helper, and sometimes they sell products on any street. They are also works as a tea staller. A small part of them are also engaged in robbery, picking drugs, and carrying arms, and so on. And there are few government and non-government organization also have some international organization. They are taking care of these types of street children, like UNICEF, Operation Bangladesh, Bangladesh Street Children Fund, Economic Development Organization, and so on. Okay, the next point is a violation of human rights of street children. As my previous speaker said that Imamul Hussain, he said that the human rights in Bangladesh is a vulnerable position. So if we talk about all over the vulnerable position, then if we talk about the children, then it's obviously their rights are not guaranteed. They are publicly tortured, beating by sometimes police, security personnel, and also they are facing sexual harassment on the street. However, Article 37 of United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child stated that no child shall be deprived of his or her liberty unlawfully or arbitrarily. The arrest, detention, or imprisonment shall be used only as a measure of last resort and for the shortest appropriate period of time. Whatever it is, the laws and regulations are not followed, especially for the street children. Normally, if we talk about general children, there are laws and regulations for children, but for specifically street children, there is no laws regulations, even a single provision in the regulations. The next difficulties they face is child trafficking and sexual exploitation. They are trafficked to other countries. The main end of street children child is to marry or sexual abuse. If we talk about the girl children, most of them, the majority of them faces the sexual harassment on the street. One of the major issue is using children to engage in illegal activities. There are political pioneers or leaders. They always use children as a criminal activities, and they, by using the street children, they sell drugs. Sometimes they also use the children to beg on the street and collect money from the public. Sometimes they are using as delivering weapons, selling drugs, robbery, pickpockets, and so on. Some of them dangers in their lives include being beaten by police. We have seen a few days before on media that few police beaten beaten street children on the street. They tortured and they abused. One of the major issue also rights violation in the juvenile justice system, as we are here talking about their legal protection. So we are actually highlighting the violations of the juvenile justice system. In our national laws, the Children Act 2013 and Children Act 2074 and 76, they are talking about juvenile justice system, but still there are few discrimination on the street children. In Bangladesh juvenile justice system arrangements, street children face double risk. They are being arrested by the police sometimes, and they are being arrested and captured and take them to the detention center, and they are being tortured. Sometimes they are arrested, but their families, their relatives, they are not informed. Street children are regarded as guilty gathering by the police and the public, or will become holy gangs. If they are placed in a confinement area or detention center, they will face discrimination, and sometimes they face they face also sexual assault, torture, and embarrassment. However, with the violation of the rights were provided UNCRC or Children Act 2013, the police kept them in contact with adult criminals, or subjecting them to physical and sexual abuse, which is a great violation of the law and the juvenile justice system also. Children rights under international law. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is the main legal means to consolidate the world in ensuring that children fully enjoy the common social, economic, and public rights of common freedom. However, Article 25 of the UDISR also states that everyone has the rights of enjoying a lifestyle, sufficient well-being and prosperity, including food, clothing, accommodation, clinical consideration, and basic social management. Another organization, yeah, UNICEF, has granted also countless rights to all children, among which several endurance and protection rights of street children have been routinely seriously ignored. Apart from some sophisticated legal instruments, there is no special attention to street children in any global instruments. Normally, they are talking about the children, but not about the street children, especially. In our analysis, we found that the number of street children in Bangladesh is increasing day by day, and the issue is not taken seriously by the government. These street children even poses a danger to the society, even while no special attention was paid to street children in Bangladesh. Subsequently, street children faced numerous problems and human rights violations. The guarantee of the rights of street children is not granted by various local and also international instruments, but the actual situation is completely unexpected. In any case, they deny many basic fundamental freedoms too. The Children's Act 1974, 1976 even are designed to ensure the protection, the ultimate interest of children in his legally continued life, and some basic protection measures have been established. They have also, separated juvenile courts and prohibits joint initial trials of guilty adults or adult criminals with the children. Due to inadequate infrastructure, violation of the law on children often cannot be guaranteed. The Children Act 2013 also does not clearly stipulate street children, and it is expected that the government to enact laws to protect street children from abuse and strict trashing behavior. Here is my conclusion. We have pointed out some issues that Bangladesh government can ensure to protect street children. The government should guide a comprehensive review of street children and their families with the legal purpose behind strict relocation. The government also can arrange job opportunities for the guardians so that their children cannot be on the street. The government organizations such as the law enforcement offices in Bangladesh and the other departments also can interact with the street children. So that's why the government should formulate legal policy rules and prepare a similar way to protect the street children. The government and various NGOs also should take measures to ensure sound shelters and provide free medical facilities for street children, as they are suffering. They are suffering sometimes health issues without any treatment. General guidelines and professional preparation projects should be initiated to ensure a bright future. In order to ensure their rights in juvenile justice, the government also should ensure that the beauty of each child lies in the circumstances which has been given under the international law and also the national instruments. The court can assume practical responsibilities by providing basic assistance to street children to all stages of the procedure and ensuring the provision of rehabilitation interaction. Inspection and authorization system should be implemented for the violation to protect these young children from physical, mental, and also, of course, the sexual extortion. The government can set up a different committee for street children. If it is not practical, the Ministry of Social Welfare or another department of the National Human Rights Commission can open up, I mean, to change their position. Then government can establish a basic assumption about the nature of child insurance management cross report, and also can establish normal standards between different actors, such as in a child safety coordination part, and so on. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your kind cooperation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for the very detailed and comprehensive presentations, Mr. Tuhin. And I think today we all are learning a lot, and I can see that all the research presentations and research projects are very impactful research, which can make a lot of improvement on what's going on in our surroundings and within the jurisdictions. Thank you so much. So now I would like to invite next presenter, Mr. Muhammad Ashraful Islam from International Islam University, Malaysia. He'll be discussing on dispute settlement under the clause with special reference to compulsory procedures and appraisal. Mr. Ashraful, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me present my screen first. So is it there? Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Honorable Chair of this session, the conference committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present here. The topic of my presentation, the topic of the paper is dispute settlement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, with a special reference to compulsory procedure and appraisal. So I'm co-authoring this paper with Dr. Muhammad Jahidul Islam, Assistant Professor of ICOL IIUM. So I'm actually the PhD Research Fellow of ICOL. Dr. Jahidul Islam is my co-supervisor. And I'm also working as a graduate research assistant of Research Management Center of IIUM. So without further ado, let me present. I'll not take more than 10 minutes, inshallah. Okay, the paper examines the dispute settlement mechanism under United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and special concentration is given on compulsory procedures, which entails binding decisions. And the purpose of this paper is to evaluate the applicability and effectiveness and to find out the strengths and weaknesses of these provisions. So this is a legal and doctrinal methodology, which is followed by an analytical approach. Okay, now let us see the dispute settlement procedures in brief. So part 15 of the convention discusses about dispute settlement provisions. There are two types of provisions: general provisions and compulsory provisions entailing binding decisions.
We cannot hear you. I think now you are muted now. Could you please unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Now we can
Sorry.
hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, there are two types of provisions for dispute settlement I have mentioned, general provisions and compulsory provisions, and I was highlighting about the general provisions. So Article 279 mentions that state party, they will try to solve the dispute relating to any application or interpretation of the provisions of this convention by peaceful means. And an indication is given there that they will try to follow the Article 33, Clause 1 of the UN Charter, where state parties are guided to solve the dispute by negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, exchange of view, by this kind of provisions in a peaceful manner. So Article 280 is also mentioning that this peaceful means will be chosen by the parties. There is no imposition by the convention. They will choose any of these provisions. And Article 281 mentions that if the settlement is not done through peaceful manner, peaceful means, then the next provision will come into operation. That is, compulsory provision will not be operated, will not be implemented until and unless the peaceful means are failed. So Article 282 mentions that if there is a general, regional, and bilateral agreement and which confers the parties to solve the dispute, which impose the parties to solve the dispute through a compulsory procedure, in that case, general provision will not apply. Then parties, during the process of solving the disputes, they can exchange views between them under Article 283. And Article 284 mentions about the conciliation procedure, how conciliation can be done. So it is mentioned there that one party will offer the other party. If the other party accepts, that is not enough. There is another thing, that conciliation procedure should also be accepted. There is a conciliation procedure mentioned in Annex 5 of the convention. So parties may agree on this, or they can settle the dispute following a separate conciliation procedure, but it must be accepted. So if the offer is not accepted, offer for conciliation is not accepted, conciliation cannot be done. Another thing is, if offer is accepted, but parties do not agree on the method, conciliation procedure to be followed, in that case also conciliation cannot be done. So this is the general provision trying to solving the dispute in a peaceful manner. But if the peaceful manner fails, then compulsory procedure comes into operation. And this compulsory procedure is actually the unique provision of this convention. So Article 286 specifically mentions that, first of all, peaceful settlement shall be done. If it fails, then you can come to compulsory procedures. So Article 287 mentions about 4 forums for solving the disputes. ITLAW, International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, Annex 6 of the convention says in detail about it. Then the World Court, International Court of Justice. Then another court, Annex 7, Arbitral Tribunal. And then Annex 8, a Special Arbitral Tribunal. So there are 2 standing courts and there are 2 ad hoc tribunals here. But there is a condition mentioned in Article 287 that before accepting, before ratification, or at the time of ratification, or any time after that, a state party will have to accept the jurisdiction of any or more of these courts and tribunals. If a party does not give a declaration accepting jurisdiction, in that case, the ultimate forum will be Annex 7, Arbitral Tribunal. Then Article 288 says about the jurisdiction of these tribunals and courts. 2 jurisdiction, dispute relating to interpretation and application of this particular convention, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or interpretation or application of any international agreement which is signed between the parties under this United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Article 290 empowers the courts and tribunals to impose provisional measures for peaceful settlement, for proper settlement of the disputes, and also for preventing environmental hazards. And Article 293 mentions about applicable laws. So it mentions that the mother law would be the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and other pertinent provisions of international law can also be applied here if these are not inconsistent with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And Article 296 mentions that the decision given by these courts and tribunals are final and binding. That is the main feature here actually. The decisions are final and binding. And final and binding on the disputed parties only, and final and binding for that particular dispute only. So it will not operate as precedent. So the basic feature here, there are 2 types of forums for dispute settlement: standing judicial bodies. There are 2 standing judicial bodies: International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, and another one is International Court of Justice. Actually, at the time of selecting this forum, it was some of the juries, they have actually said that there is a world court already, International Court of Justice, one of the permanent organs of the United Nations. So why there is a necessity of another court for solving law of the sea dispute especially? So it was discussed that International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, a separate tribunal, is needed because International Court of Justice only can apply jurisdiction if the state party accepts the jurisdiction of ICJ. If they do not accept the jurisdiction, International Court of Justice cannot operate there. So if a tribunal is established under this convention, the state party who are ratifying this convention, they will be bound by this particular tribunal. And there are two ad hoc tribunals, arbitral tribunal under Annex 6, Annex 7. This particular tribunal is very popular actually. Recently, Bangladesh fought two cases with Myanmar and India. So initially the cases were filed in this Annex 7 arbitral tribunal against India and Myanmar. And later on, the case between Myanmar and Bangladesh was transferred to its laws after giving a declaration by both the parties. And the case between Bangladesh and India, this was tried, this was solved by the arbitral tribunal under Annex 7. And there is a special arbitral tribunal, especially for the seabed activities under Annex 8. So let's see the criticisms. There are lots of criticisms made after enactment of this particular dispute settlement provisions. One of them are limitations and exceptions made under Article 297, 298, and 299. That means state parties, they have some safeguards. In some cases, they might not accept the jurisdiction of this particular tribunals if it is state security matters, military activities, seabed research activities. In those cases, they can actually deny the jurisdiction. It is empowered by these provisions. And there is another criticism that a non-uniform interpretation might be done, as because there are several forms. So ICJ might explain the provision in a different way, laws may explain in a different way, and arbitral tribunals may explain in a different way. So there might be fragmentation of international law and the law of the seas. And there might be inconsistent decisions for same kind of dispute, similar kind of disputes. And another criticism is ITLOS is considered to be a judicial competitor. Actually, it is not a criticism. It is an apprehension of the ICJ judges at the time that ITLOS might be a competitor. And another question was raised that why are you incorporating the provision in the convention rather than incorporating them in an optional protocol? In most of the cases, it is done in that way. So it was defended in the way that if the provisions are inserted in an optional protocol, so a state party might ratify the convention and might not ratify the optional protocol. In that case, there will be there will be lack of jurisdiction by the courts and tribunals. The findings are the provisions. I found that the provisions are unique. These are flexible, user-friendly, and equally effective. There are some limitations and exceptions under Article 297, 298, and 299, but these are needed for state security, state sovereignty, and other things. And the makers of this convention did absolutely the right thing, incorporating these provisions, including these provisions in the convention itself, rather than incorporating them in an optional protocol, because already I have mentioned that there could be a complexity in that case. And these dispute settlement provisions made in the convention are more comprehensive and more exhaustive. We have already seen lots of cases where conclusive decisions were made by these courts and tribunals. So in conclusion, I must say that the provisions may not be perfect in all cases, but the best that could be attained. The flexible provisions allow the parties choose their forms properly and user-friendly, as the state parties can keep some sensitive matters out of the compulsory procedures. And some says that this particular provisions does not have enough teeth to include all the disputes, but it increases the acceptability. For the best outcome, I recommend that the state parties, they must use these particular provisions in a positive attitude for solving the dispute, but not for making chaos, and in a constructive manner. So that's all about my presentation. So I'd like to thank you all. Thanks to the conference committee for sponsoring my paper. I'd like to thank the conference chair, and I would also like to thank my co-author, Mr. Mohd Jahidul Islam, for your valuable advice and guidance. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashraful. That was wonderful. And it's very good to hear, Law of the Sea presentation, because I'm also fancy about Law of the Sea. And in fact, my PhD was under Professor Gafur at ICOL, and I work on maritime security. So I talk all about piracy, maritime terrorism, and illegal fishing. So I hope we can have, collaborations in the future as well. So thank you so much. So with that, that's the end of all the presentation sessions. So we have covered all the 6 presentations, and thank you everyone. And all the presentations are wonderful, and I learned a lot from your presentation. So now, without further delay, because we also have another section, let us open the session for Q&A now. So if anyone have a questions, please switch on your microphone and please feel free to address the questions to the respective speaker. Thank you. Any questions from any audience? Dr. Zahidul, do you have any question?
Not really. Anyone else if they want to ask question?
Yeah, because I want to give chance priority to the audience, before I ask the questions to the respective speakers, because I have few questions for the speakers.
Yes, yeah, you can ask question.
Okay, so maybe we start with I have a questions. Let me just ask one questions each for all the presenters, right? To be fair. So for the first presenters, if nobody is asking, so I think it's a golden opportunity for me to, get your answer from more clarifications on your presentation. So the first, for this first speaker, Dr. Naja, I think, right? Dr. Naja is here. Hello. Okay, so she talks about this developing sustainable residential tenancy scheme for Malaysia, and I'm sure this is also the impactful research for the further development in terms of legal development in Malaysia. And I think Dr. Naja gave comparative analysis with Scotland.
I think Dr. Naja is not here.
Oh, not here anymore. Okay, maybe she left already. Hey, okay. Not here anymore. Okay, then. So for the second speaker, I think not much of a question. I just want to, support your discussions, and also I personally agree with all the points that you mentioned during your presentations, and it was a wonderful presentation. And
Thank you very much.
Yes, and I have a question for Mr. Imamul Hussein, and that was very comprehensive presentation. And actually, I was surprised to know personally the research findings as well. So for these human rights violations in Bangladesh, and of course, since I'm from Myanmar, we both are familiar. We all are familiar with this Rohingya crisis as well. And in fact, we have to be thankful to the Bangladesh government and also the community for assisting all the Rohingya refugees in your country. And I really, really appreciate all of you here.
Thank you.
For all of our Bangladesh friends, also the government. And so I'm just wondering for these situations, and actually I can combine my questions to both of the speakers on Mr. Imamo and also Mr. Tuhid, because you both discuss human rights issues, human rights violations, and I think both of you highlighted these corruption issues, the abuse of these criminal justice systems and all that. So is there any what would you suggest, or what would be the most effective and most practical way to solve these problems? Because based on your presentations, we can see that even the authorities, law enforcement authorities, are involved in all those abuse and then corruptions actions. So what would be the effective way? And of course, you can do research and maybe you present your research findings. So how about the implementation of the suggestions to improve the current justice systems and to reduce all those human rights violations? And that will be my first question. And sorry, I have two questions. So for the second question, since Bangladesh is already the member of the Rome Statute, So is there any possibilities that, to take actions for those human rights violations to bring into the ICC? Is there any options or any solutions, any feedback and comment from you?
Thank you very much. At first, I would like to answer the first question. When conducting the report, I found some issues which are the main reason for the vulnerable condition of human rights in our country. At first, I'd like to tell the culture of impunity for the law enforcement agencies and the ruling party is the main things to commit human rights violation and any other violation in our country, because the existing government assumed power through a controversial election, and many of the people of our country do not cast their vote. So as the government is illegal, so everything is going illegally to control and to protect the government power. It is the first thing. And uh, all the constitutional institution and democratic institution are collapsed in our country. That's why everyone try to flattering the government to give some extra benefit from the government. And government also willing to give some extra benefit to those who are support the government to run their illegal power. It's the main reason. If we able to establish a democratic government, in that case, I think the whole situation will be better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe Mr. Tuhin, do you want to answer for particularly maybe on your presentation part?
Okay, thank you so much. I will agree with Dr. Imamul Hossain. I also add that that Bangladesh has ratified and recognized so many international conventions, and also report has been conducted every year through the international organizations, but still the position is the same before. So my point is there that a strong and careful government who really cares about the human rights we need. Otherwise, this situation will not totally exhausted. I mean, this situation will exist until a careful government who really cares about human rights. And if you talk about, you raised the question about the ICC, who will? In my opinion, there is no one. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure this is.
Just I want to add something. I want to add something. The topic is related to Bangladesh. I'm also from Bangladesh. Not about Bangladesh. The question is about the developing country. We are the developing country, very poor country. Structure. If you see the developing countries structure, democratic structure, some organ, for example, election commission, and separation of power, judiciary, executive, legislative. This separation of power, independence of all this organ. This structure is very weak. It's not the fault of the government actually. If the structure is not strong, it's difficult. It's come on to the government, So the thing is, if we just say it's the problem of the government, it's I don't know how right it is. So we have a lot of problems. So overall, so all this thing going to the government. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I understand this is we are just discussing from the legal point of view. There is nothing political. Yes.
Actually, though it is not my topic, may I ask? Yes. I'm also from Bangladesh.
Yes, sure. Yes.
I've been a law teacher for 15 years. Yes. So actually, I could not help. The thing is about you said about going to ICC. Actually, the matter is it is not like genocide or not like a mass violation. So,
Yes,
and
yes.
also there are specific laws in our country, including Children Act, Penal Code, all those other laws. So there are specific laws, and the courts are also operating properly. The thing is in the root actually. We're not educated properly. The poverty is another reason. So prevention is better than cure actually. So we cannot prevent actually. So that is the reason of this mass violation of human rights. So it is not against a particular community. Sometimes some allegations are raised that particular community. Actually, the scenario is not like that. Sometimes it happens, but not in a massive scale like the thing in your country. We are saying that it happened. So not like that. So I think that there is no. Actually, it is not the situation like to go to Rome Statute or go to ICC. In our domestic court, we can solve this. But the
Yes.
what Dr. Jahidul Islam has said that the executive, legislature, and judiciary should work properly. That is the thing. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, yes. In fact, yeah, it's the same thing, no need to even mention what's happening in my country as well. So yeah, maybe we can off the record discussion later on, maybe, right? But anyway, thank you so much because I just wanted to know because it is mentioned in the presentation. So, and it's just our academic discussions. Thank you so much for responding and entertaining my questions very comprehensively. Thank you so much. And now for, I think Miss Naja talks about very interesting topic on this restorative justice for child offender in Malaysia. I think this is very important issue
Doctor.
to be addressed. Yes?
Yes, Doctor, please.
Yes. So actually, this is very interesting, and I have a question. So I just want to know these restorative justice systems. You also mentioned about it's kind of like meeting, arranging a meeting among the child offender, and also the victim family, right? Two parties meet up together, sit down, and think about reconciliation, right? And what could be the potential remedies. So in that case, could we say, is it this restorative justice system is same like kind of like mediation or any alternative like ADR kind of thing? Can we say it is like mediation, negotiation, conciliation? Is it the same thing?
Thank you, Doctor, for addressing this issue. Well, basically, restorative justice is one of the alternative dispute resolution. Some use mediation, some use restorative justice, because there are so many methods under the alternative dispute resolution. So basically, if we refer to the example of the restorative justice in New Zealand, they call it as family group conferencing. So it is a conference which involves everyone, every stakeholders that is affected by the offense. If we refer to some other countries, they are also it is called as victim offender mediation. So they use a mediation method as a mediator. So it depends on how the country or how the law would adopt. Some countries or some jurisdiction may think that mediation is the best way by having a mediator and two parties are discussing. And some jurisdiction, according to their culture, maybe they opt for conferencing whereby they have someone like a referee or a middle person just to involve in the discussion. But I believe that it is a sustainable method and it is the best way, because we can appoint actually a legal practitioner to become the mediator or to become the referee, and they will regulate and to ensure that every resolution is still in accordance with the law and not contradict to the law as well as human rights. So it depends on how the country and how the cultural implementation. But for Malaysia, I would like to suggest for family group conferencing better than mediation, because it seems like Malaysia, we are still having good family relationship, and also the involvement of parents in taking care of their children. Even if we see in the child court, for example, usually when I was practicing as a paralegal and when I was practicing as a lawyer, parents are coming to the court to support their child. So I think for Malaysia, it is best for us to adopt for family group conferencing. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for a very comprehensive answer. And yes, now for NCLOS, Mr. Ashraful Islam. Yes,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
was very, I don't know, it's very interesting. You discuss like within short, time, like you could discuss in a very comprehensive manner on the dispute resolution methods under the UNCLOS. So I just have one question, because this is something that I want to know as well, and I think this is quite relevant for Malaysia as well. Yeah, when it comes to maritime dispute resolutions, right? So different types of disputes. For example, like territorial disputes, right? So we have, especially in Asia and in Southeast Asia, I think we still have, in fact, for Malaysia also, there are still unsettled maritime boundaries, right? So because of that, there are, of course, various implications. One of the significant implications would be the law enforcement, because we cannot ensure where is our jurisdictions, right? So because this is quite relevant to my research area, this is what I found out, right? Because of, lack of defined maritime territory. So this is also a maritime territorial disputes, and one of the example would be this ICJ. Both Malaysia and Singapore went to ICJ on Pulau Batu Putih case, and there is a judgment given since 2008, and still, the implementation, the agreement is still not finalized, right? So, what would be your opinions like if we have this kind of, yes, for the dispute resolution, but of course, in terms of agreement would be very good, right? Mutual agreement. This is what we went to. We want to have this kind of mutual agreement. This is also one of the peaceful settlement of disputes that you mentioned by agreement. So if there is a difficulties and we have these long-standing disputes and so many issues coming in and implications coming in, so what would you suggest? Like maybe if you have to pick any of the, one of the dispute resolution mechanisms under the UNCLOS, what would be the most effective and practical and efficient way of dispute resolution?
Okay, ma'am. The first thing is I'm a Bangladeshi, so I actually have zero knowledge about Malaysian context.
Yes.
But I have some opinion here to share.
Yes.
So with your country, actually, we had an agreement in 1974, Bangladesh and Myanmar. So that was the basis of our dispute, referring the dispute in arbitral tribunal, and later on it was decided by it laws.
It was, yes.
So the thing was, in 1974, both countries, Myanmar and Bangladesh, and later on, Bangladesh claimed that Myanmar is not actually fulfilling the provisions of this agreement, actually relating to settlement of territorial sea, economic zone, and continental shelf. So at a time, actually, Myanmar claimed that the Saint Martin Island does not belong to Bangladesh. So later on, Bangladesh had to go to international forum because peaceful settlement were exhausted. Because this agreement, Bangladesh claimed that it was violated, and Myanmar claimed that actually this agreement has no legal effect because the parties, the military junta who signed this agreement, they did not have the authority to sign it actually. So for this reason, we went there. So in the context of Malaysia, so as because the provision specifically mentions that first of all, you will have to try for peaceful settlement. You cannot go to international courts and tribunals at the very first moment. So I think that negotiation should be the proper way first, negotiation. So they try to negotiate the matter. They should try to enter into agreements. So, and if it is not possible, then there could be mediation, conciliation. Malaysia can offer conciliation. So as it is mentioned there in the convention in Article 283 that Malaysia can offer. So if it is agreed, they can enter into conciliation procedure. So once they enter into conciliation procedure, there is no way out until the conciliation procedure ends or the time limit fixed is expired. So after that, if no settlement has been reached, then they can go to international court. So I don't know the stance of Malaysia, whether they have ratified the convention, whether they have accepted the jurisdiction of any particular tribunal. So that is the process to be followed later on. So first of all, every country who have ratified the convention will have to try peaceful settlement of disputes, and that is the unique thing. So you'll have to try peacefully first, then you can go. And once you go for the compulsory provisions, the decision which will come out from there, you cannot disobey it. So the same happened in case of Bangladesh, Myanmar, Bangladesh, India. And the very good thing is, in our country, in Bangladesh, the people processed that we won. And the same thing happened in Myanmar. Myanmar also thought that they won. So this win-win situation is actually the strength of this particular convention. So we both thought that we won. So that's why I like these provisions very much. So I suggest that first of all, negotiation is the better process.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. I have the same opinion. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much to all the wonderful presenters today. And I think later on maybe we keep this contacts and networks.
Excuse me, Dr. Suwai.
Yes, yes.
May I have permission to ask a question to
Oh, sure, please.
Raja?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is
please, sir.
related. The question is related to my research area, but it is not specifically based on her topic, but somehow it's related. So my question is how Malaysian legal framework deal with the issue which are related to the child abuse or child, I mean the sexual offense regarding child. If the armed forces service member or the soldiers commit these kind of offenses, how you deal? Do they have any specific mechanism to deal with the service member, or it's common to the whole legal framework?
I beg your pardon, sir, if I can reiterate your question before I give my answer. Is it your question is concerning about what is the law governing the service officer if they commit sexual abuse against child? Is it, sir?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, I also need to apology because this is not a specific area of my research. But I'll try to entertain this question. Well, basically in Malaysia, we have common court. I mean the criminal court as for the normal offender, as well as the military court, which govern the disciplinary issues of the military. But however, if the offense is committed against the public, regardless of whether they are child or whether they are adult, the offender is still will be brought to the normal criminal court. The current practice in Malaysia is that we have a new law, we have a new act which govern the sexual offences against child, which I see that Malaysia actually give more protection for the child after coming of this new act, which is Malaysia has protect child more after coming of this act, regardless of whoever the offender, whether they are military or they are public or even the family member of the child is still being protected. And everyone, no one will escape the liability when they commit a sexual offense against a child, no matter you are a military or you are a public person. So thank you, sir. I think that's all my question from my general knowledge about this matter. And I'm sorry if I couldn't provide more comprehensive answer for you. Thank you, sir.
Just I want to add with Noor Naja. Okay, for the child matter in Malaysia, there was a juvenile act, but it was dissolved already with the Child Act 2001. Child Act 2001, the special act for the children. So like other countries, if any children abuse or any crime, so it will go to the child court. And there is some jurisdiction, and accordingly it will camera trial and everything, it will be followed by the Child Act 2001. So if you are military person or anyone else, if any child abuse or anything else, then it will go under this act. Thank you.
I actually have one question for Mr. Tuhin Mia. Is Mr. Tuhin here?
I think yes, he is still here.
Okay. I just want to know how the practical part on how the Bangladeshi government and even the Bangladeshi people protect the rights of these street children, because in Malaysia, although we have the Child Act, as well as we have so many other laws regulating the child, but still we have a lot of NGOs which protect the right of the child. For example, we have a book NGO which provide books for the child, or NGO which provide shelter and protection for the child. So how is the practical part in Bangladesh?
Okay, thank you so much, sister. Actually, there are laws. There are laws regarding Children Act, like Children Act 2013, Children Act 2000, 1974, 76. Even there are national policy, which actually focus also children. But the practical situation is there is no laws, even a provision uh, for the street children. There are laws, but in general children, but not for the street children. First of all. Second is there are so many organizations, international organizations like UNICEF. There are so many non-governmental NGO, so many government organizations also. They are also taking care of street children. They are providing sometimes food, sometimes they are providing education, but very few. Position is very few. There are some NGOs. They are actually practically they go on the street, and they sometimes they provide food. They takes their name, and sometimes few of the street children they collect, and they provide some shelter and also education, but very few, not so many. This is the actually practical situation.
Thank you, sir.
You are most welcome.
Any more questions? Okay, so if there is no more questions from the participants and the speakers, I think that's the end of our session for today. It was wonderful, and it was wonderful experience, and I learned a lot from you all. And I would like to say thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invitation, the Asian African Society, and also my brother, Dr. Zahidul Islam. Thank you so much.